2009. In the town of Churchill, in the Latrobe Valley, someone has deliberately lit a fire.
We need the fire brigade, please.
Glendonnell Road, Churchill.
What road, sorry, sir?
Glendonnell Road, just out of Churchill.
It's an incredibly dry, windy and hot day in Victoria, Australia.
On Black Saturday, the temperature in the Latrobe Valley reached 46 degrees and wind gusts reaching 70 kilometres an hour created an inferno.
It is one of 400 fires that day, now known as the Black Saturday bushfires. And for this town alone, 36,000 hectares of land are destroyed, 150 homes ruined, and 10 people are killed. The community is devastated. Then, 3 days later, a shocking revelation. Local man Brendan Sokaluk is charged with arson. As details emerge, it's revealed he was once a volunteer firefighter. He was found guilty of deliberately lighting a bushfire that killed 10 people and was sentenced to 17 years and 9 months in jail.
In the end, the jury decided Sokaluk was an arsonist intent on wreaking havoc on one of the worst days in Victoria's history. The verdict means Sokaluk is responsible for the deaths of 10 people, more than any other convicted killer in the state.
It is a story that gives some small insight into just how devastating arson can be. In this video, we're going to try and understand what would motivate someone to light fires, who are the people doing it, and we're going to dig into what we know and what we've gotten wrong about pyromania. I'm Sana Kadar. This is All in the Mind. In Australia, we have around 60,000 fires every year, and a big number of those have human origins. Those deliberately lit fires cause massive damage and endanger human lives. Before we get to why someone might want to start a fire, let's first look at who would deliberately start one. Very few arsonists are caught and convicted, making them really difficult to profile. But here's what we do know. They're usually young men, under the age of 35, who have had difficult childhoods. That could be something like abuse or bullying or financial troubles. Usually, these young men haven't had the easiest run with school or work either, and they're also often involved in other antisocial behaviors. They could have a history of violence or drug addiction as well. To come back to Brendan Sokaluk for a second, because he really did fit the profile of a typical arsonist who is caught. Brendan had a hard childhood. He had trouble holding down jobs, and during the court case, he was diagnosed with autism and low intellectual ability. Brendan had also been a volunteer firefighter, an alarming detail, but sadly not an isolated one in Australia for arsonists.
A volunteer firefighter who deliberately lit fires in a national park has been jailed for 5
Although
years.
Brendan didn't last long at the Country Fire Association before being dismissed, there was suspicion that Brendan might have been lighting fires. He was known to turn up at fires that he couldn't have possibly known about. And he did something similar on Black Saturday, turning up at a property to help put out spot fires.
I didn't mean any of this to happen. I thought it was out when I threw it out the paper and shit out the window.
The judge in his trial found he did deliberately start the fire, but he didn't believe that Brendan meant to kill anyone.
For the victims, these were and are life-changing events, and no sentence that I impose can in any way compensate for their loss.
We may never know why Brendan Sokaluk started the fire, but research does give us some insight into what motivates others to do the same. Let's take a moment to focus on the why. Why would someone want to start a fire?
Police are now investigating if this fire is linked to dozens of others in Victoria, part of an ongoing conflict between organised crime and bikie gangs.
The most common reason is pretty straightforward: anger or revenge. It can also be part of other antisocial or criminal activity, so often fires can be started to try and cover up another crime. In some ways, I can wrap my head around those motivations. I can understand them without condoning the fire setting, of course. What's stranger in a way is when people light fires without these kinds of obvious drivers at play. For some people, they are fascinated with the fire itself. There's a very small group of people like this: pyromaniacs. Pyromania is a psychological disorder. It's described in the DSM as an impulse control disorder. There are lots of let's call them myths, when it comes to pyromania. Largely that the setting of fires is related to sexual arousal. To unpack that, we first need to go back in time to the 1900s to visit this man, Sigmund Freud. The father of psychoanalysis is known for a couple of psychological theories about repressed sexual desire, which could honestly be a whole video on their own, but today, let's just focus on his theories about pyromania. In 1932, he wrote this paper believing that people are aroused by fire because they would have repressed sexual urges and would want to extinguish the fire to release those repressed sexual urges. Honestly, it's not even his most wild theory about sexual repression. Have you seen his Oedipus Rex theories? Back to pyromania. So was Freud right? Is it because of sexual arousal? Well, modern science has looked into it, and they have found nothing. No relation at all. Using physiological measures to look at sexual arousal, researchers found there is no link between the two. People very, very rarely, if ever, set fires because they have a sexual interest in fire. As it is regarded as an impulse control disorder, it's more likely that pyromaniacs can experience it as an urge to set a fire. They are setting fires to experience intense physiological arousal, but as an excitement or an adrenaline rush. Again, not sexual arousal. Despite the term being used colloquially, an actual diagnosis of pyromania is very, very rare. In studies of people who have set fires, between 0 and 3% of them have a pyromania diagnosis. This is the diagnostic criteria. You can see it includes deliberate fire starting more than once, that arousal or excitement from setting the fire. The setting of the fire can't be related to hallucinations or be better explained by a manic episode, for example, or someone having an intellectual disability. So for some people, they may have a strong interest in fire, but not meet this criteria. And while pyromania is rare, often it starts in childhood.
2 boys aged 11 and 15 have been charged over the fires near Newcastle, north of Sydney.
Unfortunately, a large part of fire setting is done by kids. So what do we know about them? Well, research on kids is unfortunately scarce, but a few recent studies do point to some common characteristics among these children. This Japanese study looked at 64 kids who'd visited a psychiatric hospital and who'd engaged in fire play. More than half those kids had ADHD, which makes sense because ADHD can mess with your impulse control. It also found that boys were more likely to have set fires than girls. These kids were also more likely to show antisocial behaviors, things like shoplifting or theft or damaging property or violence. This is similar to other studies too, like this one from New Zealand. It looked at almost 2,000 children who got referred to an intervention program run by New Zealand's fire service. The kids and teenagers typically had hyperactivity problems, family dysfunction, and behavioral problems. The good news is that most kids who play with fire will grow out of it. This is the age crime curve. It shows how crime for all kinds, including arson, will peak between the ages of 15 and 22. It means that most kids will grow out of their antisocial behavior, including maturing out of setting fires. But if you're watching this and you're thinking, hang on, I know a kid in my life who is starting to light fires, and you're worried, most fire and rescue services in Australia run these fire setting education programs, and these workshops try and teach young people about the dangers and consequences of fire. So for those kids who are experimenting with setting fires, it aims to reduce that interest. Unfortunately, as with a lot of intervention services, the kids who need it the most are least likely to get it.
And the reason is that those children who are lighting fires are typically neglected. And so the parents themselves are not engaged. In fact, the parents are kind of part of the problem. So, yeah, I think any parent who actually cares about their child is not going to end up with a little arsonist living in their household.
So, in the end, arson, like so many other crimes, is as much a social problem as anything else. And these days, with climate change and soaring temperatures bringing in a new era of bushfires, it's a recipe for disaster. If you want to listen to more All in the Mind, you can find the podcast on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like this video, subscribe to this channel for more criminal psychology videos.